constitutional amendment, which I think is, I mean, it's got to be complicated, right? I mean, if we've only, in 240 some years, we've only had 26 or 27 of them. I mean, 2 of them are about drinking, right? Or 2 of them are about, yeah, 2 of them are about drinking. So that's like, that's 13, right? It's like, proposed by either body of Congress, 2/3 majority of the House and the Senate. Then you have to have a constitutional convention called by 2/3 of the state legislatures. And yeah, so now, so women do have the right to vote. That's the 19th Amendment. But there is no equal rights amendment. I don't know. It sucks to be a woman, right? In this case. But again, why am I talking about this so much? Because again, the United States is a little bit unique in the sense that we are one of 2 countries in the world, major countries in the world, that grant citizenship by place of birth rather than who your parents are. It's got this like Latin name of like, one is like something by blood, and again, the other one by place. Equal Rights Amendment guarantee equal legal rights for all American citizens regardless of sex. It seeks to end the legal distinctions between men and women in matters of divorce, property, employment, and other matters. It's all pretty fair to me. It missed the deadline. It was supposed to be done by March 22nd, 1979. All of you who believe it should have been passed can blame Idaho, Kentucky, Nebraska, Tennessee, and South Dakota. I've only been to South Dakota once. I got a I got a ticket for jaywalking in South Dakota. What? Has anyone ever here been in South Dakota? South Dakota, anyone? My wife, who's an immigrant, had never been to Mount Rushmore. And I lived in Wisconsin at the time. So I was like, dude, that's like only 3 states away. Like, who can't drive to Mount Rushmore, right? Like, totally can do that. So, yeah, at that time we were just like starting the day. So it's like kind of like our first like road trip kind of thing, right? Remember all of you have your relationships, right? To get that first trip kind of thing going on. Yeah, we drove to South Dakota. Oh man. So we saw Mount Rushmore, which is basically a big rock with 4 faces on the side of it. Yeah, it looks pretty cool, but you're so far away. It doesn't even look that cool because you are so far away from it. Then I heard that there was this like castle or really big house made of corn. It's called the Corn Palace. It's like made of like stalks of corn or corn cobs or something. And every year they have to like swap out a bunch of it because it's got eaten by animals or rots away. They have to like replace it with other corn. I'm like, dude, and it's on the interstate on the way to Mount Rushmore. So why wouldn't you stop in this little city called Mitchell? Why wouldn't you stop in Mitchell, South Dakota to see a big house made of corn? Like big, not just like a little like, residential house. It's a big thing. So of course you do that. Park, and then I walk across the street to the Corn Palace. Cop's got his lights blaring, and yeah, I got a jaywalking ticket for $35 for jaywalking in Mitchell, South Dakota. That's the last time I've been to South Dakota. But don't you have to be doing something else, like jaywalking and stabbing someone? I mean, don't you have to be like doing something else, like
in downtown, police just stand around.
That's fine. Honolulu's got what, 1 million people? Like we're talking Mitchell, South Dakota, which has like 100 people. Anyway, I got the ticket, and have you ever gotten a jaywalking ticket?
I just make sure either I look around and make sure there's nobody there, or
the cop did teach me a lesson because I haven't jaywalked since then. Yeah. How much to be a U.S. citizen? Anyone want to know how much you'd have to pay to be a U.S. citizen? $500,000. Yep, $500,000 to $1 million. for an EB-5 visa, and that would be your path to citizenship. Does anyone want to take a guess of what country in the world makes the most use of the EB-5 visa? Who's got a lot of money and maybe wants a different country to be a citizen of? China. 40% of EB-5 visas all go to rich Chinese citizens. Now, you know, people complain about it, right? And then it's, you know, we do live in an unfair world. I don't know why anyone would be shocked that you can buy citizenship. Well, there's a cheaper way to become a U.S. citizen, at least. A cheaper way would be that you're having a child, you come to the U.S., and then you have your child, and then you leave with your child. And your child would then have the citizenship of the country that they were born in, the United States, and the country that their parents are from, whatever country that is in the world. Dude, that's not most of what. Anyone want to guess? I'm not sure why today is like anyone guessing day today. About a million. We get about 1 million immigrants a year. We get about 1 million immigrants a year, legal immigrants a year into the country. Of that amount, about 50% would be immediate relative. That would mean spouse, child, or even parent. Could you be don't you have to be like actually married? Because I watched that one show. What's that? Yeah, have you seen that show too? Man, some of those people are crazy.
Submit paper.
Yeah.
And they could come to the U.S. for 90
Yeah.
days, and then what they do is like they decide within the 90 days if they want to get married.
Right, because you have, and not that you have to, but don't you kind of have to?
Yeah, you have to if you want to get the papers.
Like there's that one person, right? Who there's that, what was that guy? Remember there was like the Moroccan guy?
Oh, with the white lady?
Yeah, with the white, yeah. And she's got that like daughter, and then she goes off for like 2 months, and she leaves her kid behind for 2 months with her parents, so that she can like spend a month or two like with the other guy who says, "Oh, the office was closed. I couldn't get the." He like always makes up these stories of like, you know, like, "Oh, the office was closed. I couldn't get my birth certificate, so we can't get married yet." Oh, they didn't tell me why they denied my visa. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, he seems like he's up to no good. And weren't there like some like how do you put it nicely? Some pictures out there of some kind, right? Yeah, I'll kind of guess where I'm going with it. You know, it's we just have a long history, at least in the United States, up until 1965. This is where things start to get creepy. We're not like basically up to 1965, if you were from a Western European country and you weren't a Jew, you were probably pretty good to go to become a citizen of the United States. You could be piss poor, and as long as you were from a Western European country, you were pretty much good to go. You could come with no skills. And I add the Jewish clause because there was a pretty long period of time, especially during World War II and the rise of the Nazis in the 1930s, where immigration officials knew that many European Jews wanted to flee, obviously, the tyranny of Hitler and everyone else, and they wanted to come to the U.S. They had the money to come to the U.S., but the U.S. wouldn't let them come in. So, well, anti-Semitism, I mean, I think is still probably you know, just like for Catholics, right in the 19th century, in the 1800s, it just was, you know, Jews in the 1930s. Up until 1965, and even 1950s. So up to the 1950s, there were large exclusions against Asians coming into the United States from a legal immigration standpoint. people from African countries, or would you basically just say, right, that people coming from poor African countries are basically excluded from coming into the U.S. for a lengthy period of time. These waves where, I mean, some of these have horrible names. I wrote this down just because the pen felt dirty after writing it. What was it? Well, I mean, it really is. Okay, so here we go. Immigration Act of 1917. Let's start with, let's go back to the very first one. Okay, the very first law we have in the United States about immigration, right? So countries formed 1776, right? We got a big constitution, we got a Declaration of Independence, we got a Bill of Rights. One of the first laws, I guess, which would be during the Washington administration, right? As in George Washington administration says, as long as you're a free white person, you can come into the United States. It was called the Naturalization Act of 1790. The only way you could be a citizen of the United States coming into the United States would be you are a free white person, meaning you're not an indentured servant. That would be the free part, white. I don't think we were talking about shades of white here. I think we're just talking like white. I think it's probably the best way to describe it. For individuals who are black, you actually, what? 1790. So George Washington. 1896. So 1896 would be the, let's see, who had been president in 1896? That was before Roosevelt. McKinley? Is that McKinley? Yeah, because McKinley would also be then the one that took over Hawaii, right? McKinley. Yeah. So why is there a McKinley High School in Hawaii? That just seems like the worst thing to call a high school, doesn't it? Campbell, right? Let's see. For black individuals, 1896. So during the McKinley administration, you could finally be a non-white free person and have a path to citizenship. That path to citizenship is what we're calling your naturalization. Asians, 1950s. So basically, we're expanding the color palette here. We're making it a little bit broader. So whites, then blacks, then Asians. But the second law, so the first law was 1790. That's the first Immigration Act. The next one doesn't come about until 1875. And now basically, there's this period of time after, so 1791 was already kind of restricted. It just said basically who can come in. That was free white people. All the laws after that are who specifically can't come here. Dude, I'm not endorsing any of these. Let's just be very clear here. Apparently, the Page Act of 1875. So the Page was a pretty famous congressman in the 1870s. The Page Act of 1875 specifically stopped Chinese women from coming into the United States. They were considered immoral, and the word I wrote down here from the actual act was undesirable. Apparently, the best way to describe it would be that they were fast and loose, would be the best way to describe. And specifically, it was Chinese women. It wasn't even like, I mean, I don't know what the wave. I mean, think about this. You have a wave of Chinese immigrants coming in the 1840s and 1850s because of the Chinese gold rush, or the California gold rush, right? Where so you have this, right, and then they're building a railroad, right? All those kind of like common things. But there's actually no laws against Chinese males coming in. It's actually all directed towards, for some weird reason that I don't, because I've never taken an Asian history class, Asian studies history class, but they're really fearful. The white men writing these laws are really fearful of Chinese women for some reason that I'm not aware of, maybe you've taken a class where you know the reason why, but I don't know the reason why. I tried to do some outside research on it. And again, it's not like that they're, right, for Chinese men, there are a series of laws made later against Chinese men because they were worried about how cheap the labor is and that it's going to displace poorly trained, ill-trained white workers, right? So white workers are then saying, calling their, well, telegraphing their congressmen, right, and saying, don't let Chinese men come into the country anymore because they're taking my railroad job. Yeah, those laws come later, but the earliest one is against Chinese women for some reason. So much so that the 1875 Act against Chinese women becomes so popular that they expand it in 1917. So we have 1790, then 1875, where you start to say no Chinese women. Now you have 1917. And 1917 becomes this peak year of stopping other people from coming into the United States. Yeah.
That page act.
Yeah.
It says that the Chinese women were like prostitutes.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. Yeah, the newspaper article I read that was talking about how great it was. Yeah, it did say it was on the New York. What was it? The New York Herald. That was describing how great this law was saying that prostitution, undesirable, and immoral. Immigration Act 1917 then stops all Asians. You don't have to just be a Chinese woman. Really kind of stops all Asians. So this is like World War I has just kind of wrapped up or is wrapping up. And the US really closes itself off to everyone else. So Asians, homosexuals, no homosexuals, no one with an intellectual disability. So you're really just saying, I want,
What year?
1917. So it's right during the time of World War I is just kind of wrapping up here, if it's not wrapped up.
That's like 10 years before they joined that too.
Yeah. So 1917, no homosexuals, no one that has an intellectual disability, no Asians in general. So you really find this time here, and then you get some, as if that's not enough. Now, again, I did not come up with this name here. And the 1917 one is a really scary time, at least from the looks of this. So I was reading a different article that was then saying, really after that act, then what they tried to do is say, who is in the US that came in before we passed the 1917 Act, and how can we get rid of them and send them back to the place that they came from, even though they had a legal right to be here. So there was this military mission called Operation Wetback. Sent 1 million Mexicans that were actually legal US citizens, or at least legal US residents, and either through coercion or basically forced removal, even though they had a legal right to be here, forced them back into the United States. And that was actually the official name was called Operation Wetback. 1954. So really after 1917, what's happening is that those are the old, right? So nothing in what I said about 1917 said, to be honest, it's really hard to make a existing citizen into a non-citizen. It's really difficult. Like you have to be like, death to the USA, right? I'm gonna bomb a post office kind of person to like, stop and you have to have some other place that you could also be a citizen of for them to say you can't be a citizen here anymore. Like it does take quite a bit to not be a US citizen anymore. Like we had some of those examples of like, is there like someone from like Minnesota like joined like Al Qaeda, right? And then like they had
that droned.
Huh?
Was it the one that droned in Libya or something?
I don't even know. But like then the person decided to change. Then the US said, okay, you're not a citizen anymore. You're with Al Qaeda or whatever. And then the guy is like, oh, just kidding. I actually want to be back in the US. And then the government was like, no. Right. So you have to go through this long legal process to not be a citizen. But I mean, of all these things, like at least in the Immigration Act of 1917, you'd be like, oh, dude, I'm gay. I guess I can't come to the US. At least there it's a little bit clearer because you're like, well, I'm living in Canada and I wanted to come to the US and I'm gay and they're saying I can't. Like that's a little, like it's unfair, but it's at least a little bit clearer than saying, oh, you're a citizen of the U.S., and then 30 years later, you're like, sorry, yeah, I'm going to drive you back to the place you came from. It just seems pretty unfair. And actually, the time where things start to change finally is 1965. So 1965, things actually do get better in the United States. We talked about why 1965 was important last week. Why was 1965 important in last week's lecture?
Civil rights act was passed.
No, not civil rights.
Oh, you said last week's lecture?
Yeah, last week's lecture.
Oh,
Medicare we get food stamps, and we get Head Start. It's all part of this war on poverty. So FDR during the Great Depression gave us Social Security, not a bad thing. He gave us unemployment compensation, not a bad thing. But there was no Medicaid. That meant that there was no health care for the poor. There was no Head Start. That meant that there was no early childhood education for the poor. And there was no food stamps. There was no food security for the poor. All of that changes in 1965. Well, it's the war on poverty. It's what Lyndon Johnson did, right? So Johnson becomes president after JFK gets shot, and he finishes up JFK's one term, and then he gets his first full term. And then he decides not to run for re-election in 68, I think, is the year that he had to run for office again. And he said, no, I just want to do the one term, and I'm done. But what he did is he tried to carry on he's a Democrat from Texas, and he tries to carry on the legacy of what JFK did. And he was a progressive guy. And remember too, at the time, JFK had that brother. I don't know what the brother's name was, but Robert Kennedy. So Robert Kennedy was also very popular. And Robert Kennedy, I mean, he looked like JFK. He'd like go to like shitty towns in West Virginia, you know, and shake everybody's hand, and you know, and Johnson was concerned, like, dude, this young kid who's like shaking every poor person's hand is going to become president. I don't. The what? Well, yeah. So maybe, right. So maybe there's a big conspiracy and they killed the guy. But also Johnson probably said, well, maybe we should. Right. So there's a self-interested reason for why he cared for the poor so much. So he creates this trio of social programs that are incredibly important today. And on top of that, Immigration and Nationality Act of 1975. The most important thing that it did is it stopped quotas of non-Europeans. So it used to be the case that like they'd say like 1,000 people from Djibouti can come in every year, and only 1,000. After we hit the 1,000, no more Djiboutians. 100 Haitians can come in every year, right? After the 100, no more can come in. It abolished it. And that was transformational because almost 3 out of 4 immigrants at the time the law was passed, 3 out of 4 were Western Europeans coming into the United States. 3 out of 4 were not subject to the quota, right? So you could get in like 2 bajillion Irish people, right, coming into the US, and there was nothing that stopped. There's just, right, if Ireland was having a shitty year in the economy and everyone came here, like, it's just the way it was, right? But if you're having a shitty year in Djibouti and 1,000 people already came, there's nothing you could do, right? It stopped. But in the year 2000, which is kind of the latest, 2005, 15% of immigrants are now coming from Europe. So we went from almost 3 out of 4 to less than 1 in 5. So I guess Trump is right? Didn't he complain like about how like not enough like Swedish people are coming here or something like that? I think it was like some thing. And then I guess the other kind of like surprising things, the 2 surprising, like when we think of Republicans, what do we tend to think of? Like, are Republicans for immigration or against immigration? Against, right? That's what I've always thought until I was preparing for this lecture. But actually and so my wife came to the US in 92. So that was when my wife came here. And my wife came, what was it? My father-in-law, my wife's father, fought with the South Vietnamese. Now, obviously, South Vietnam lost. So then when South Vietnam fell, then the North was like, dude, you fought for the wrong side. I'm throwing you in jail, right? So then my father-in-law got thrown in jail after the South fell. And, but somehow like my brother-in-law, like he was just a little kid. He got out and like some like Catholic nuns or whatever somewhere in the U.S. like adopted him and like brought him over. You know, he got a job and then he sponsored the rest of the family to come. So in 1990, Bush, the father Bush, the one that's dead, the old one that was like jumping out of planes, that guy increased immigration by 40%. Amazing, right? Like he actually increased the number of people allowed to come into the US by 40%, which makes sense because when my wife came in 92, right, for years, my father-in-law had been trying to bring his daughter, my wife, to the US along with him and his wife. And he could never get like a spot until 1992, right, when he came over, courtesy of the Bush administration expanding, the first Bush administration, expanding immigration by 40%. Yeah, and then it gets even weirder. The Clinton administration, a Democrat, like a Democrat, this is like the second time now that Democrats have done something crazy, and Clinton specifically has done something crazy that seems so undemocratic. So the first one, this is not, you don't have to write this down, but it used to be the case that you could be on food stamps your whole life. Like you could be on food, like if you didn't have a job and you kept not having a job, you could get, for instance, you could be on TANF, which was this program, TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. Like shitty things could be happening to your family, and there were special grants for your family to get income that you needed to survive. You could be on food stamps for years and years and years, and there was no limit. And the Clinton administration was actually the one that stopped that. They did like, you know, there was like probably all these like crazy stories of like what they would call like welfare moms, right? Like someone that has like a bajillion kids, they would collect all this welfare. Like I'm absolutely certain there was someone out there like that, but dude, kids are pretty expensive, and I don't think like an extra $100 in a welfare payment is gonna like have kids are a pain in the ass if you don't like them, right? I mean, it's not worth $100 a month. But the Clinton administration stopped it. But the Clinton administration also dropped legal immigration from 800,000 people a year to 500,000. So Bush increases it in 1990, and then I think it's 1998, the Clinton administration reduces it. It's kind of amazing. Like I didn't, you know, I don't know if it's like Newt Gingrich effect, like maybe Newt Gingrich made him do it or something along these lines. But I guess I just thought it was kind of crazy that was the way that it was. Well, let's take a guess here. Does anyone want to guess where we get most of our legal immigrants from? Which country sends us the most legal immigrants? So again, we have about 1 million people a year coming into the U.S. and becoming as an immigrant legally every year. Who sends us the most legal immigrants? Nope. Philippines is on the list. It's number 1, 2, 3, 5. Number 5. China is number 3. Japan's not even on the list of top. Mexico is our top one. 161,000 a year. At least according to the data from 2 years ago.
This is legal.
Legal immigration. 161,000 people a year. Now, a great deal of that would be, right, a path to legal citizenship would be your, well, there'd be 2 sources. The one source would be, whenever that one law was passed where you used to be able to like just walk across the border and by being here long enough, or no, it was you were a kid, your parents dragged you over the border like when you were like 1 year old and you didn't have any idea. And then they called it later the DREAM Act, right? Like under the Obama administration. So like you were 1 year old, what are you gonna say? No way, Dad. I'm like, right. So the idea was your parents drag you across the border. Now you're like an adult. Well, what are you gonna do, right? Like you don't even know what Mexico is except where it is on a map. There had to be some sort of a path to citizenship with that kind of person. And then what you would do is that once that person becomes a citizen, they then sponsor other family members to be able to come to the US. So Mexico is top. Anyone want to guess number 2? Canada. It's a weird one. And just think of the history of the US. And who do we hate and who do we love? for some weird reason. Why do we hate and love this one
Oh,
country?
Russia.
UK,
No,
Israel.
no. Cuba.
What?
Cuba. Exactly. Think about it. We've hated Cuba and loved Cuba for so long. It's like a little country. It's a little country. But because it's like so entrenched in like the politics of the US in the 1960s, right? And of the earlier era, right, where Cuba was with Russia or Soviet Union. We were, right? It used to, this is the thing I don't like about immigration law, right? Is like, you could be a piss poor Ecuadorian and you can't just like, not that you could swim from Ecuador to the United States, but if you could, right? If you could swim from Cuba to the United States, you can actually become a citizen. As long as you set foot on American soil and you are a Cuban citizen, you are allowed to be, you have a path to citizenship. But if you're a Mexican and you're in like Tijuana and you swim to San Diego, they send you right back, right? So like, why? That doesn't seem very fair to me. Like, why do Cubans get the good luck? I mean, do we actually know any Cubans?
There's a lot of people in Florida.
Yeah, no, they're exactly. But I don't. Do you know any?
I used to live there. I don't think I personally knew one, but
Yeah. Do I know any? I don't think I know. Ooh, in Real World season 2 or season 3, right? There was that one guy, Pedro Zamora. Yeah, see, yeah, Real World, oh, that was a great show. No, the only one I know is that TV one. Yeah, it's half as many as Mexico sends. Dude, Mexico is a far, far, far bigger country than Cuba. I don't know why the Cubans get all the love and Mexicans don't. China sends only a little bit less than what Cuba sends. Cuba, China, 1 billion people. I don't even know how many people live in Cuba. I'm not trying to do a whole anti-Cuba rant right now, but it just seems unfair.
It's because of the whole, Castro and they were like.
Castro and Kennedy, and that we have to protect Cuba, and also not liking Castro, and yeah.
Didn't the trade embargo, wasn't the trade embargo lifted?
Technically, it's still there. So. Technically speaking, so the only history of Cuba I know are a few things. 1898, we built Guantanamo, right? Or something around those years, right? And we promised that we're going to pay Cuba like, I don't know, 60 pounds of gold a year, right? Because it's the 1800s, right? We'll pay you 60 pounds of gold a year or whatever the amount was, so we can keep this base on Cuba. And like then when Castro takes over, he's like, dude, get your base out of our country. And then one year, accidentally, Cuba like accepted the gold, like when they shouldn't have. And now the Americans are like, dude, you just like, you accepted the contract because you took the gold that one year. And the Cubans are like, no, we tried to get it back. Anyway, Guantanamo Bay. Any of you military people ever been there? No. There was a guy in 1 year in class I had that. So we had that base there. But basically, up until the 1950s, dude, Cuba and the U.S. were like pretty simpatico. Like we were pretty good friends. And then Castro takes over. And then when Castro takes over, he expropriates American property. So now you've got big corporations in the United States, like, well, one example would be like AT&T, which built most of the telephone lines in Cuba. It's like, dude, Cuba took our old copper telephone lines in 1950, and you never paid us back for it. So because these corporations have these huge claims that the Cubans would never be able to pay off, the U.S. will never lift those sanctions because they're like, Cubans owe us money, our American companies money, and they won't pay it back. So we're not going to lift the sanctions. So sanctions aren't lifted, but then the Obama administration said, well, why can't we like now that like Castro was dead, and I think the brother's dead too, right? I think they were like, well, why can't people just like go and visit and like buy some rum or like go and what else did you do in Cuba?
Cigar.
Cigars, yeah, Cuban cigars. rum. This is the second time this week I'm not talking about rum. Cigars, rum. What other generalization can we make about Cuba? I'm just trying to think. Yeah. Apparently there were a lot of flights. That was like the big thing in the U.S., like a new destination for planes to go to. Well, anyway, the Trump administration obviously reversed the Obama administration. The one thing they can't reverse, though, are the laws that were passed during the Kennedy administration, which did say, and the Bush administration, the first Bush, which basically again says if you can make it to the U.S. any way, shape, or form, you are golden. So I guess the one question would be, before we open it up to, how long does it take, would you think? And this is what at least some anthropologists and sociologists, cultural anthropologists and sociologists, how long does it take an immigrant to assimilate to the United States, on average?
I would say it depends on.
It does depend, right? So my in-laws, dude, I don't think they've assimilated. They've been here since. I mean, but they should, right? They're old already. So like,
Age definitely affects it. That's a huge factor.
it's a huge factor, right? I mean, go on.
I was
Take
going to
it.
use the example of my daughter's grandmother. She hates America. She wants to go back to the Philippines, but her daughter, my daughter's mother, she feels the opposite. She doesn't want to go back to the Philippines. She wants to stay here and not even deal with it anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I guess it's hard too because it really depends on what country it is that you're coming from too, right? So like Vietnam is still a communist country, right? So when I think about my wife and her parents, like, dude, I mean, I haven't talked to many people that live in a communist country that leave it and want to go back to it. I don't typically encounter, like, China's a little bit of a different kind of communist country because it is communist, but it's become so market oriented since 1978 that it's not like communist like the Vietnamese. It's not communist like North Korea. It's not like communist like I need one more. Just to pull up another communist country. Communist country. What?
Cuba still communist?
I think technically it might be socialist.
Angola?
Because they have a legislature. I don't know what the rules are for how you become technically communist. Anyway, but it takes about 20 years. It takes about 20 years on average for an immigrant to assimilate to the United States. So that'd be averaged across years. That after 20 years, right, let's say, so on average, right, you can imagine a young couple coming to the United States with a kid. The kid obviously assimilates pretty quickly. That takes the parents about 20 years to assimilate to the United States. That the assimilation process is different for if you are a professional, right? A professional meaning you have a career and you're brought right into that industry. It's different if you live in a specific part of the community, right? Right. So if I was Chinese and I moved to Chinatown in Honolulu, right? You might imagine that my assimilation might be a little bit slower than if I lived in Alwarm, right, or something along those lines. Those few mile difference might make the difference. The last thing I will say is, I don't know. I felt very dirty and icky inside. Having to read all this shit. I mean, because it really is kind of like, it's just really mean. Like, I don't like people being mean to each other. I mean, I know I might seem like a mean person myself, but I don't like people being mean to each other. So it just, everything I read about immigration just struck me as unfair. Like, people playing favorites just because they were always the favorites, or people being not liked just because of a generalization. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I just made generalizations about Cubans, right, rum and cigars, but I mean, I'm not hating anyone or liking anyone because they like those things or don't like those things. But I don't know, like the Cuba thing was just one example of something that just bothered me, right? And it was just one of a series of things, right? Like the law of the Page Act, right? Like, dude, Chinese women, I mean, yeah, they're really cranky, right? I mean, I've met some really cranky, my mother-in-law being one example of a very cranky woman, but it seems really wrong to just say, just because you're a woman of Chinese descent that you can't come over here. That just seems wrong. Right? No homosexuals. That just kind of seems wrong. Like, to me, from my perspective, I'm not stopping you from. But we are a democracy, so somehow we've all decided these things, or we haven't. We're actually going to do a movie today too for part of the class. It was a particularly troubling movie for me because I guess the one thing I've been trying to wrap my head around, which I am suspecting is what who suggested this topic? Should I blame for this? So it's the one I blame for this dark week of mine, man.
Oh my God.
So when did your family come?
So they came in 1980, like 79.
From
My
where?
dad came in 1979
From where?
from Salvador.
From El Salvador. Okay.
And then my mom came from Guatemala.
Okay. And where did they go directly to the U.S. or did they go through Mexico to?
Yeah, so they were pretty much they crossed the border.
And what year were you born?
86.
Okay, so you weren't born yet. Okay.
Mhm.
Were you brothers? Because your brothers are older, right?
No, so my brother, so my mom came when she was 15. So at 16, she had my brother, my oldest brother.
Your oldest brother. Okay. And he so you and all your siblings were already U.S. citizens because all three of you were born here.
Yes.
Right,
So
okay.
my parents, I think it was in 82 that they had Ronald Reagan
Mhm,
made
yeah.
like
Yeah.
for any
The Central American, yeah, I've heard about
that
this. Yeah.
had kids within before or after 1980,
Yeah.
they were eligible to like
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
papers.
Mhm.
And so my dad got his papers and then he gave it to my mom.
Mhm,
And then
yeah.
my mom, my grandma got it because she also had a son
Mhm.
in 81.
Yeah.
And then pretty much they my grandma would send her,
Mhm.
her family
Yeah.
to come,
Yeah.
but
Exactly.
they
Yeah.
didn't have any papers.
Right.
So once they came here, then they tried to like kind of like
Mhm,
get
yeah.
their papers.
Yeah.
pictures,
And were they able to?
Some
Somewhere,
of them did,
yeah.
some of them didn't.
Because right, we do have this notion, right, of chain migration. So when we were talking about like, right, what is half of the immigrants that are coming into the U.S. every year, the million people every year, half of them are linked to someone who's already here, right? We're talking again, spouse, child, parent if you're unmarried, right? Somehow you're linked to someone else, right? If we think about that assimilation and that, like, how dependent are they going to be on the system for a living? Like, dude, their husband's already here, their mother's already here, so they're probably not going to be needing, like, being worried about food or like how to ride the bus, right? Like, their family is gonna, to some extent, family members do take care of family members, right? And it seems kind of wrong to again just say, you know, nothing, there's no option for you. On the other hand, right? Again, the thing that seems to just keep bothering me though too, like it's all about timing, right? Because what if your parents are trying to do it now? Like they'd be totally fucked. Like there'd be like no path, like given the current administration and its current philosophies, right? Like I guess it's true, right? In history, like timing is everything, right? Like it just seems.
But the thing that bothers me about
Yeah.
like what they say about immigrations is
Mhm.
like everybody thinks is like Mexicans are immigration, blah blah blah.
Mhm.
But most of the percentage that comes
Mhm.
and they're immigrant are people that came with visas.
Right, exactly.
And
Yeah,
they
yeah.
came legally.
Legally came
so
into the United
they
States,
want
yeah.
to blame like they say Mexicans.
Right.
But it's like, but the people that are actually like coming
Mhm.
and actually like staying here
Yeah.
are not Mexicans.
Right.
They're people from other
Other
places.
places. So see, that's another thing I guess I've learned over this past week was that, you know, again, I make generalizations all the time, right? Like old people drive slow, old people watch Wheel of Fortune, right? I'm not hurting anyone by making these generalizations, right? Old people don't give a fuck about me, and right? I mean, not hurting their feelings. They're old, right? They're Methuselah age, right? They don't care about me. I don't care about them, right? The generalizations, though, right, is that they take. I guess the other thing I learned, like when I was trying to understand this page act, because it bothered me all day on Tuesday, like as I was thinking about it, because I was like, dude, what was it about Chinese women that this page guy really disliked so much? Like, what was it, right? And it probably like takes like a few examples, right? Like Page's brother says if this Chinese woman jaywalked across the street, so obviously they're all immoral. I'm gonna write a law, right? I mean, it's the generalization that seems to hurt everybody, like in that successive generation. Like people seem to like latch onto it. Because as I was trying to understand, like, and again, I'm sure there's a few of you who are like, go Trump, like, MAGA all the way. And right, and I'm trying to understand like what is that? Like what is contained within that rhetoric, right? In that description, that narrative. And again, it's gotta be like someone got wronged some way, somehow, and then generalized it and perpetuated it for like a whole generation. I guess the thing too that bothers me is like we might think, oh well, again, you might like the guy and be like, I can't wait for another 4 years, right? And then there's other people like, he'll get out of office and then we can recover from what we had. But the legacy of like what we do in one generation carries on, sometimes to the benefit, right? And it seems again like Reagan and Bush were like actually like champions of like immigrants coming into the United States, right? And then you've got others like this Page guy, right, who like fucks over an entire generation. And it makes like in ways, unlike just like writing a law that says like you can't drink if you're not 18 or you can't drink at all. Like this one's actually like people dying in El Salvador, right? Because in Guatemala and basically Central America, which went through lots of upheavals in the 1970s, right? And not only just because of drugs, but also because of dictatorships, right? Right? I mean, people die, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. So like, why wouldn't you want to go to a place where you're not going to die? Like, of course you would. But think about that. Like, if Reagan had been the opposite way and just said, no one can come over, like people lie. Like, that's pretty meaningful. Now, this is me on my, stoop saying, oh, I think the world would be, but it made me in a grumpy mood. It made me in a, I don't know, when we think about, again, my personal opinion, like when we think about the current administration, how they arrived at what they do and why they do what they do. There's some notion of like a wall. Like, it makes me, reminds me of the impact that each of us have in this world, right? And sometimes to the benefit of others and sometimes maybe not as much. Yeah, quite, yeah.
Do you have any data on which states take the most benefit?
Yeah, so the top 4 states that I saw was Texas, California, Florida, and New York. New York, it's the indication was that a lot of it was from Caribbean nations to New York. Florida, it was for legal immigration paths. It was Cuba, Dominican Republic. For Texas, it was Central American and Mexican. For California, it was East Asian. And that was kind of the top 4 states. What you see in those 4 states is you actually see, depending on the politics of the country, let's look at California first. So when my wife came to the United States, she had 3 choices. So the INS, the way that if you're a legal citizen and you're coming from a country, not by like choice, but like you're a refugee, because the other side of this was we combined immigration with refugees for this week. So my wife was a refugee, right? So it was my wife's family, right? They sympathized with the South. Obviously, the North, Vietnam ran the country. So obviously, if you were aligned with the South, dude, the North's not going to like you. It perpetuates to this day when my in-laws who don't speak any English, when they have to have an interpreter at the doctor, and the interpreter is from the North, like they immediately notice it. They don't disclose any of their medical ailments, and it's basically a waste of my time having them to the doctor because they won't disclose anything that's wrong with them as long as the person from the North is the interpreter. Waste my time and make me grumpy. But when she came, she had a choice of Hawaii, San Diego, California, or St. Louis, Missouri. Those were her 3 choices. right? And this is not unique to a Vietnamese person. Ethiopians all end up in Minneapolis or Detroit for the most part. So there's these cities that the INS, Immigration and Naturalization Services, pick where people go to, right? If you're not just coming by choice, but you're just coming. And so a lot of these, again, the idea for this from the INS's perspective is it aids in the assimilation. So when my wife's family came here, even though my brother-in-law is in Virginia and he sponsored the rest of the family to come over, they came to Hawaii. So the only way that they're going to assimilate faster is the fact that, right, there's a pretty big Vietnamese community here in Hawaii, and they found enough people that get them like established, and then they're good to go, right? Or at least better to go than if they were just in Mitchell, South Dakota, right?
I think there's like, we're focusing on the economic aspect of immigration, but there definitely is a political aspect. Like
There is.
14% of Americans are legal immigrants. That means they're citizens. They legally immigrated.
They're either citizens, they're on a path to citizenship. When we say immigrants, that means that they have a path, meaning they have a visa of some kind, they have a green card, right? And I don't know all the, right? Or I've got $500,000. I've got something that puts me on a path, whether I want to stay on that path or not is my choice, but I have a legalized, specified path to become a citizen.
That 14% is those that already became citizens.
That are that culminated, yes, that 14% culminated that process of them becoming a citizen. Yes.
From what I've understood of voting behaviors of immigrants, I mean, especially those that come from or are say being like socialist or communist countries, they tend to vote more conservative as well.
Yeah, I would say that that's true, especially, and I did read the one specifically about the Vietnamese just because I was interested in this idea of like, why does San Diego, a city in California, which is already a pretty democratic state, they actually voted to office some pretty strange, pretty extreme conservative individuals. Yeah, exactly what I've learned is that not only because if you think about it in that kind of way though too, usually for those individuals that's not obviously including my wife or her parents, not including Sully's parents. If we were talking about like, as many of you know, I told many of you in this class, I bought a pretty sizable Mongolian bond about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Actually, just under the threshold of being a Mongolian citizen. I'm not on a path to being a Mongolian citizen. I have no desire to be a Mongolian citizen. I am not patriotic towards Mongolia. But you would imagine that, let's say I hated the US and I loved everything about Mongolia. And I know someone who did, Christopher Atwood, a guy who I know pretty well. He bought the same bond that I bought, and he's following that path. It's like one of these weird, like, I don't know how you, without saying something very mean, I can't describe how he is. If you want me to describe it after class, then I'll happily do that. But he decided he's, screw the US, I'm going to become a Mongolian citizen. He was already pretty rich to be able to do what he did. He bought more bonds than I did, and obviously he exceeded that threshold. So you're probably talking, for that 14%, you're probably talking about someone in the upper echelon of whatever country they were in originally, right? And that they could afford the path to do what they did, right? So if we think about where Sully's parents came from, right? Obviously in that culture, if you were a high-ranking government official and you had enough bribe money and whatever, right? And you came to the U.S., you probably came to the U.S. legally. You didn't even have to wait for Reagan to like say, even the poor can come, right? This rich person just came in and either, got a spouse that was already from here, or did the EB-5 visa, which they call the golden visa. That's why they call it the golden visa, in part because you gotta be shitting gold to like get that visa. So that's part of it too, right? I think would be interesting to see would be if you are a immigrant who,
I think you should look at the times too, because like you said, it was surprising that these Republican regimes, I don't want to call them regimes,
yeah,
they allowed more immigration
Mhm.
policies than expected. Some Democratic presidents were the opposite.
yeah. Do you think there's
I
a
don't
political?
know.
Do you think there's a political right? Like maybe
There-
I don't know. Do you know how your parents vote?
But I mean, like,
So my mom's a citizen.
Yeah, but do you know like what kind of party she votes for, or do you know anything like? So
I don't
maybe
even know if like political participation is popular among immigrants.
but
That's
popular
another question.
political participation is popular. Like my in-laws never miss a chance to vote. Never, ever. They vote for like, even in Hawaii where the general election doesn't matter, right? Only the primaries matter. They vote for every possible election they can. I don't know if it's because they have time on their hands for what they're doing, but I do it only because I like to give the middle finger to the man and like screw someone else over. But like they will vote at anything, and so their participation levels are high.
I mean, so in that case, and studies show that they do tend to vote more conservatively if coming from communist or socialist countries. Maybe accepting more immigrants during the time of a Republican candidacy
Yeah,
might help with the conservative vote,
yeah,
but I don't know the numbers at that time.
yeah. Because it might be hard. I wonder. I
And
mean,
even
you would
then-
think it's extreme, but I bet you there are probably a great deal of immigrants that love Trump, right? I mean, there's got to be some, right, who say like, I came in under the rules, or right, or even right, like even if Reagan changed it, right, they say like, I came in under the rules, I'm productive, but right now people are just coming here because they can't find a job, right? I mean, like these generalizations that, yeah, I mean, again, my perspective. Dude, I mean, when did my family come to the U.S.? Well, my family was rich, but they came in the 1930s from Western Europe, so I guess thank God that there was people loved Western Europeans. I don't really know I mean, I really don't know very much because in that case, you're like escaping like, a dictator, right? You're escaping a guy who's a really mean guy. So it really was a matter of life, like directly of life or death. And then you, in their case, they were Dutch. They escaped to Switzerland, and then from Switzerland came to the U.S. But my great-grandfather, I mean, he bought the visa, like he paid a shit ton of money and bought a big, right, and got on a boat and bought a visa, right, and relatives that were not as rich. I mean, that also, again, strikes me as unfair. Yes, I was on the beneficiary side of the fact that, my grandfather was rich, but, I mean, I'm sure it doesn't take a lot to figure out, like, a whole bunch of poor people died, right, because they couldn't escape. I don't know. So, what do you think? Do you think your parents were just lucky, industrious? Like, why did they leave?
Well, my dad, because the guerrilla,
Mhm.
the guerrilla fight, like
Yeah.
wars and stuff. And then my mom, because my grandma lived here,
Mhm.
so she sent for her.
Yeah, like sent money or like what? Like, what
Like
do you mean specifically?
she would send money back home,
Mhm.
and then eventually they arranged like for the person to bring her here.
Mhm.
So then pretty much, and she was pregnant too.
Mhm.
So when my grandma crossed the border, she was pregnant.
Mhm.
So my mom was like the eldest daughter.
Mhm.
So she wanted her to come and like kind of like help her out because she knew like she had to work to send back money.
Gotcha. What about when you mentioned earlier about family members, right? We were talking about chain migration, and we were talking about like some family members didn't follow through. Like, did they come to the U.S. and they didn't follow through the path, or did they not even come, or like what was the issue?
They just never like they didn't submit the paperwork. They were just like I wouldn't say lazy, but like I don't know what their problem was, but they didn't submit the paperwork like on time.
Mhm.
But
Do you
but they
think they
got
wish
it
they
like
did,
like
or?
you said like 20 years later. Like I think one of my uncles barely got like
What did your parents have? So, I'm not sure why I'm thinking of you as the example, but you did pick this week. You made my week kind of short, so that's all I get. It's a commentary on our shitty United States in this one localized sense. You can disagree with me, but I'm sure it's not unique to the United States. I'm sure other countries have just as shitty immigration policies. Did your parents have to take a test? Did they have to do the immigration
Oh,
test?
yeah.
So what was their test like?
Well, she did it in Spanish.
Yeah, see, and my mother-in-law, she just so my mother-in-law doesn't know any English. My father-in-law knows just enough that he's really cocky about the stuff he knows. But my mother-in-law, to pass the test, in 1994, she couldn't get the test in Vietnamese. She just remembered the INS did the same multiple choice questions in the same order. So she just remembered like 100 multiple choice letters in the order that she had to remember them in. Like, I guess that's a, you gotta give my mother-in-law some credit for that. We knew what to do. Yeah, she remembered 100 options, all. Well, isn't there always those like things you see on the internet where they say like most Americans couldn't pass a citizenship test? Don't you like see those? Let's look for ones. Before any of you start feeling cocky about. Yeah, well, again, my wife is busy. She makes more money than me, so I'm kind of like, in some sense, a house husband, right? Like I left today at like 11 a.m. because I spent a lot of time with my youngest son, right? And like, if someone needs to go to the doctor, I have the most flexible schedule, so I'll drive whoever's got to go to the doctor. I know just enough Vietnamese to get through minor medical problems, and if it gets more complicated than that, with my mother-in-law, she's an older generation, but she doesn't read Vietnamese, so I can't even use like Google Translate because she can't see, and she's hard of hearing. So even if it like speaks it, so like with her, if I don't know it, like she's kind of fucked. My father-in-law, he would say to me, you don't need to take, like he drives, he'd be like, you don't need to come, Tom, I'll just go to Kaiser on my own. And he'll go there, like the one that was this week was, he got like a flu shot and he thought that it also counted as the shingles shot, right? Shingles would be like, if you had like chicken pox when you were a kid, you can get like the old person's version of chicken pox, which is like really, really bad, called shingles. He thinks that he got the doctor told him you need to get the shingles shot. And he says, no, I already got the shot. And he's thinking about the flu shot, but he just hears shot and he doesn't hear about what kind of shot it is. Don't get me started about flu shot. He thinks he got the flu shot last year, so he doesn't need it this year. It's just, now I'm just bitching about. Okay, let's see here. I don't want you to see. I'm going to ask someone a question. And let's see if they can pass it. This is the 2020 test. Anyone here want to take the first question? Okay, let's see here. Let's find you. Do you want like a hard question, easy question? What do you want? Start you off easy? Okay. What are the first 3 words of the Constitution? Okay, you got that one right. There are, by the way, 100 questions. It's no longer multiple choice. So, yeah, it's short answer now. So my mother-in-law would be screwed. Let me give you another one. Name one state that borders Canada. Yep.
Oh, hold up.
This is the actual 100 questions. Well, this is for 2020. Name one war fought by the United States in the 1900s. There we go. Who was president during World War I? Yeah. Let's see if I can find one that will make everyone. What? The Federalist Papers supported the passage of the U.S. Constitution. Name one of the writers. Alexander Hamilton. Name 3 of the original 13 states. This should be a group test, that sounds like. Who lived in America before the Europeans arrived? Native Americans. When must all men register for the Selective Service? 18, and up until what year? 26. You cannot be a citizen. What? It says at age 18, and then you have to be registered between 18 and 26. Who do we show loyalty to when we say the Pledge of Allegiance? Yes. What here, let me say it specifically. What do we show loyalty? What do we show loyalty to when we say the Pledge of Allegiance?
The flag of the United States.
The flag of the United States of America. Name one right only for U.S. citizens. Nope.
Free speech.
Nope. What is something that a citizen can do that a non-citizen cannot do? Vote or run for office is the other option. What is one responsibility that is only for U.S. citizens? What is your responsibility as a U.S. citizen? This is a different question. So the right of a citizen is to vote in a federal election, run for federal office. What is a responsibility that is only for U.S. citizens? Exactly, jury duty. Yeah. Now some of these are specific to the year you're taking it. What is the name of the Speaker of the House of Representatives now? Nancy Pelosi. What is the political party of the president now? Republican. What is the capital of your state? Oh. District of Columbia residents should answer that DC is not a state and does not have a capital. Oh, that would suck.
I think I'm showing this is Selective Service 1825 in the USA.
Well, then, well, it says up till 26, so it must be like you're 25 and 364 days, right? And then you stop at 26. What month do we vote for president? November. Who does a U.S. senator represent? Not exactly. The people of the state. Some would say the corporations, but that's not me. I sound like a really. What stops one branch of government from becoming too powerful? Checks and balances. I'll ask one more. What are 2 rights that are contained within the Declaration of Independence? Nope. Declaration of Independence. So we're not even a country yet with Declaration of Independence. Pursuit of happiness. Happiness spelled with an I, not with a Y, like it is in the Will Smith movie. Pursuit of happiness. What is another one? Nope. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Who did we declare independence from? Great Britain. Final question. What does the Constitution do? Protects the basic rights of Americans, but what's the primary thing that it does? Establishes the United States, sets up the government. Well, we can all be citizens. I don't think I could have done too well on some of these. I really don't think I would have done that well. Fortunately, I was born here. So fuck you all. I don't have to know. Right? I mean, like, because this is the whole thing that's designed to say, like, why are Americans being so self-righteous if they can't pass the same test themselves? I'm sorry, I shouldn't swear, but it's just, I don't like self-righteousness. I don't like, Sully, why'd you do that? No, it's good.
Well, if you created like a test, what questions would you put on there? Like the price of a Big Mac or something?
No, I just would be like, are you a nice person? Like, do you, like, I mean, like, seriously, like, think about it, like, what do I care where someone's from? Like, I'm sure Sully's parents are great people. Her brothers sound like fantastic people, but they're actually Americans. But like they're nice people. Like, why should I care where they came from? Like, I come from Wisconsin. I don't think any of you judge me based. Well, maybe one of you at least judges me based on the fact that I'm from Wisconsin. But I don't think any else of you care where I'm from or where my parents or whoever came. Like, why should you give a fuck? Like, it's my issue, not yours. Like, I don't know. So again, like I keep reading this all week, and it just makes me grumpy. And I don't know. Remember, we just had that long conversation about because didn't you know someone else from Wisconsin as well? Wasn't that the case? Yeah, your grandfather. That's right. He was from Kenosha, wasn't? No, he was from Kenosha. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because like, think about it. Like, the only really bad immigrant I know, like, there's only one bad immigrant I know, and he was a bad person. Like, he shouldn't have been allowed into the United States. He was just a bad person. His name was Ernie von Schledorn, and like, his name was Ernie von Schledorn. My grandfather hated him. Anytime he could bitch and moan about Ernie von Schledorn, he would, because the guy was like a member of like the SS like party, and like he found some way to like say I was never a Nazi, and he came over to the U.S. But like people who knew the guy knew that the guy was a bad guy. He got in anyway, and like he was just a bad guy. Like Ernie von Schledorn. Oh no, look that guy up. What's he doing? He was known because he sold cars. I don't even know how you spell his last name. Schledorn? I don't know. Oh, he looks like a mean old man. My father would never buy a car from him. I guess I'm stopped from buying a car from the guy. Even if he has a good deal. I guess I can't buy anything. The computer's thinking about it. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's true. It's a strong Wisconsin accent. But also, couldn't we say that about, right? I mean, isn't that what makes this country a cool place? Like, we all have different accents. Like, isn't that kind of cool? Like, yeah, this asshole. He looks really happy there. Unless you're a particular kind of person. He probably doesn't. Look at this. He's even around balloons.
Died?
He's dead. Thank God. What? He's from Milwaukee. Good riddance.
What's his deal though?
It's like a Nazi. Like, he's a really mean guy. If you ask him, he'd say he wasn't, but anyone who knew the guy knew he was. So I don't know. I mean, again, like, listen, I'm hearing about it like fourth hand or fifth hand, right? I mean, I don't know, like, yeah. See, like, well, look, see, like, even someone else here is saying the same thing I said. So see, like, I don't know, like, what do I know? Jeez. See, this is where things get like really bad. Like, how can you not go to sleep at night and have nightmares about stuff like this, right? And now caused a nightmare in one of you. He's a mean old man. We have a movie, gang. It's actually a really good movie. I watched about a fourth of it, and it was good enough that I thought we should all see it to understand how we got to where we are today, at least right now. So let's add the clause here. It's PBS, so it's obviously a little bit, it's supposed to be balanced. I obviously have not been balanced. I should have been more balanced today, but I mean, you are free to disagree. I would hope you would never think unless you're going to defend Ernie von Schledorn, you can believe whatever you want. This one's supposed to be pretty balanced, and it's supposed to be the thing that as I was saying, as I was standing over there, that the thing I kept trying to think about, right? Like, what inspired us to have this topic this week was, I think in my case, it's like, how did we get to where we are today? And why is it so different today than it was just 5 years ago, right? Like, I I'm sure we thought about immigration 5 years ago, and something seems to have really changed in the past 5 years, right? And it might be easy to say, like, it's just Trump, but I almost kind of think that's like lazy of us, just to blame one really old fat man that, one really old man, right? It's just the whole golf thing. I don't like golf. Now I'm mentioning something that plays, you play golf? So you play golf. Does anyone here play golf? It's just not a sport. It just shouldn't be a sport. It just shouldn't be a sport. I don't know why now I've offended the golf. But the understanding was, why is it so different today than it was 5 years ago? And it's not just Trump. It's like a perfect storm. Like in any perfect storm, like the movie with George Clooney, right? It takes a whole bunch of things to all combine at the most perfect moment to create this kind of storm, right? In this case, a shit storm of where we are today, right? Where we're building a very a wall where we what was the thing that although Trump can't change the Constitution and say that if you're born here you can't be a U.S. citizen, he can stop people from being like really pregnant and coming into the U.S. So he does have the right to do that. So then he made a law. Well, he didn't make the law, but he passed a policy that said if you're like really, really pregnant, you can't come into the U.S. Well, if you're from a certain country and you're really, really pregnant, they can ask you a whole bunch of questions and make you feel really unwelcome. Is basically what they can do.
Here with Japan.
What?
They do that here with Japan. So like when Japanese tourists, they want to raise their baby in Hawaii and they can live here for like 18 years.
Mhm.
So they'll stop them and tell them like, you can't be here if you're gonna have your baby here because it was like a really bad problem. But it's not like racist because like it's
We don't even have a
Japanese.
bullet train. Like, wouldn't it be great to live in a country that has a bullet train? Well, anyway.
It's like the paradise.
Yeah. Let's understand why Trump is, how we got to where we are today. I learned a lot from the first 15 minutes. I'm actually excited to watch the new report. The music and the guy makes it sound
there. This rally just about to start. A rally for Donald Trump is about to live.
We'd be on the plane, say it's giant tonight for the snake.
We're about to speak to a
And we'd have kind of an internal discussion which would last about 10 seconds. We'd say yes or no. And you said, well, put it in the pocket. If I want it, I'll take it out.
Now, has anyone ever heard the snake that I read every once in a while? I can do it if you'd like. Should I do it or not? Should I?
And he used that analogy very much for the issue of immigration.
On her way to work one morning, down the path along the lake, a tender-hearted woman saw a poor, half-frozen snake. Take me in, O tender woman. Take me in, for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman. Sighed the broken snake. She wrapped him up all cozy in a curvature of silk, and then laid him by the fireside with some honey and some milk. Now she stroked his pretty skin, and then she kissed him and held him tight. But instead of saying thank you, that snake gave her a vicious bite. I saved you! I saved you! I saved you! Cried that woman. And you bit me, heavens why? You know your bite is poisonous. And now I'm going to die.
The woman's answer, well, why would you do this to me? And he said, well, I'm a snake, right? And so you brought me into your home, and it's hard to believe that you didn't know what I was. I'm a professional killer, right? Just because you brought me in doesn't mean I wasn't going to ultimately revert back to my basic form.
Oh, shut up, silly woman, said the reptile with a grin. You knew damn well I was a snake before you took me in.
tapped into something in a very profound way that began to redefine the debate in the political year of 2016 and continues to redefine the politics of the country today.
How Donald Trump came to use resentment over immigration as a political weapon is a central defining aspect of his presidency. At its heart, a plan by three unlikely outsiders to transform the Republican Party, make Trump president, and introduce a harsh new approach to immigration. Zero tolerance.
Tonight's program contains language that may not be suitable for all audiences. Your discretion is advised.
Some of you might consider this anti-Trump. It's supposed to be balanced. It's just
America, the country makes history again, doubling down.
The story begins in 2012.
Romney was the worst candidate.
The aftermath of Mitt Romney's loss
This election might have much, especially when you look at
set off a soul searching by the Republican establishment.
some states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania were looking attractive in the closing days.
But for a small group of hard-right conservatives, the defeat was a call to arms.
What basis are you saying that? Yeah, his clock clean.
Their unlikely headquarters was in this Capitol Hill townhouse.
The Breitbart Embassy is really nothing more than a rented townhouse. And that is the center of operations for the organization known as Breitbart.
The provocative hard-right website Breitbart. Steve Bannon, political gadfly, filmmaker, and polemicist, was its leader.
We called this place the embassy for the simple reason that we thought we were in an embassy in a foreign capital, that this was owned and run by the permanent political class.
Bannon pushed Breitbart into what was known as smash-mouth coverage of Washington power politics.
I said, let's attack the real enemy, and the real enemy is the Republican establishment. What we're going to do is just go after the House leadership, we're going to go after the Mitch McConnells, we're going after the donors, we're just going to go hard at kind of this Paul Ryan philosophy.
Bannon and Breitbart figured they had a wedge issue that could help them take down the Republican establishment. Immigration.
We spent a lot more time talking to the public than we spent talking to the elite.
Breitbart's incendiary message boards proved the point.
Illegals kill 12 plus people a day in this country. Murderers, rapists. This president calls them dreamers. Deport all of the illegal aliens.
Immigration to Republican voters by a mile. It's the #1 issue, even ahead of tax cuts.
For the first time in years, it looks like an immigration reform.
A possible deal on immigration reform is now.
But the Republican establishment was going completely the other way on immigration.
Today, a bipartisan group of senators unveiled a plan.
Now, Republicans and Democrats set to announce a major compromise surrounding immigration.
They formed an alliance with Democrats to support immigration reform.
Pero para mí la migración no es un tema nuevo. Es un tema nuevo políticamente, pero en mi vida lo conozco de primera mano.
Republican Marco Rubio took the lead as the face of bipartisan immigration reform.
The political class was sure that immigration reform was going to be like falling off a log.
Mis padres son inmigrantes, mis abuelos fueron inmigrantes, la familia de mi esposa son inmigrantes. Yo vivo rodeado de inmigrantes.
Everybody understood that there was an opening, a political opening, because Republicans were ready to come to the conversation.
Even on Fox News, support for the softer immigration approach.
There were very dark days. 100% Fox News was pedal to the metal to get this amnesty bill passed.
I want to give Rubio credit because he's talking intelligently about a rational, effective, humane response to the issue. We're going to work with our colleagues to get something responsible done that's fair, but also responsible.
I like your program. I think it's fair. So I want you and President Obama to get on the phone and get this thing so it doesn't turn into a bloody
Then we can come on the show together.
Absolutely.
And even people like Sean Hannity went on the air and said, we need to rethink our position on immigration. I was wrong to take such a hard line on immigration.
You create a pathway for those people that are here. You don't say you got to go home. And that is a position that I've evolved on.
Hannity even invited a well-known reality TV star onto his show.
I think it's getting very tough to win as a Republican. Look, they've lost on immigration. They're going to have to do something on immigration because, you know, our country is a different place than it was 50 years ago. So we'll see what happens.
In the face of all that, Steve Bannon and Breitbart found themselves in the political wilderness. Bannon decided to fight back. He invited two of his closest allies to the embassy for a war council.
Stephen Miller and Jeff Sessions and myself had a dinner in this very room.
Bannon ordered from Dean and DeLuca steaks, and they drank a lot, and they ate a lot, and they talked long into the evening.
And the three of them, these are sort of, at the time especially, people on the fringe of what you would consider the sort of Republican Party.
Jeff Sessions, when he was in the Senate, was always on the outer fringes of the Republican Party. Never even entirely taken seriously, even by the hardliners within the Republican Party.
Sessions' shop was the leaders, the intellectual backbone of the immigration fight. It came from Jeff Sessions' office, it came from Senator Sessions himself, and Miller at his right hand.
27-year-old Stephen Miller was Sessions' communications director.
You had a vocal press secretary in his 20s for a backbench senator from Alabama, as far from power as you could get in Washington at that time.
The three outsiders shared a belief America was threatened by the flow of immigrants into the country. They were determined to do something about it.
They were very ambitious and felt like if they could get the message right, that this might all fall into place.
That night in 2013 at the Breitbart Embassy, they talked about how to politicize immigration.
The 1 and 2 issues will be immigration and trade, and that will be focused on workers, right? And we're going to remake the Republican Party.
Miller would handle the details of their grand design, a policy behind the politics. Fortress America.
A world, according to Miller, would be a world of walls. Miller is a restrictionist. He wanted to have restricted entry for legal immigration as well as illegal immigration.
But in order to make it happen, they would first have to stop immigration reform and take down the GOP establishment.
If you were sitting there that night, the audaciousness of what they were plotting was astonishing, and you wouldn't have given them much chance of success.
The Senate passed sweeping immigration reform
As the bipartisan bill passed the Senate and headed to the House, the insurgents had to act.
Miller knew how Washington worked and understands the way levers get pulled in Washington and how to push an agenda through that was an anti-establishment type agenda.
Miller had an outlet, Bannon's Breitbart. It was a formidable alliance.
Sessions, immigration bill will hammer Americans. Sessions comes out swinging against secretive House immigration push. Sessions, Breitbart doing great work getting truth out about immigration bill.
They flooded the zone. I mean, that's an essential thing to do if you're going to get movement, especially on an issue like immigration, where all of the organized interest groups are on one side.
Will immigration reform finally have first time in
With
years?
immigration front and center, the insurgents planned to show force in the upcoming midterm elections.
What they decided they needed to do was to find an example of someone they could take down in the Republican establishment. And when they looked around, the guy that they thought was most vulnerable was Eric Cantor, the House Majority Leader.
Majority Leader Cantor, one of the most powerful members of the Republican establishment, was being challenged in his primary by an unknown college professor.
My name is Dave Bratt, and I'm a lifelong Republican and conservative.
Polls showed Bratt more than 30 points behind Cantor, but Bannon saw opportunity.
You definitely knew what's going on. That was also happened to be my home district, but I could feel it. I knew that a guy like Bratt, they were very weak.
Fight to stop amnesty for illegal immigrants.
Following Bannon's lead, Bratt would use immigration against Cantor.
Can you believe this guy? Can you believe Ryan?
Breitbart swung behind Bratt, hard.
Eric Cantor, he's all in for amnesty.
They set the agenda for right-wing radio.
You're a coward, Eric Cantor.
Eric Cantor wants amnesty. Paul Ryan,
Anything that became talking points on conservative radio were coming from Stephen and put on Breitbart. And you had a transformation where conservative radio hosts weren't clicking on Drudge Report on what to say. They were clicking on Breitbart.
There's a story of Breitbart. Republican National Committee declared.
What are the Republicans getting out of Eric Cantor being House Majority Leader? I'm not sure.
Then I want to pass the baton to Senator Jeff Sessions.
The insurgents rolled out their big guns for Brad. Sessions
Not worthy of Pat Buchanan.
and Steve Miller's ally,
Eric Cantor is reelected, heaven forbid.
talk radio celebrity Laura Ingraham.
There's a good chance we'll have amnesty by the end of the year.
Eric Cantor is definitely in trouble in his district.
Dave Brad here, he's got a big turnout. He's gonna make.
They'd thrown everything they could at Cantor.
Eric Cantor's district, let's send a real.
And on election night, the Republican establishment was in for a shock.
History-making upset. House Majority Leader Eric Cantor lost.
Cantor was defeated.
We took him down. That we took down Cantor with Dave Brad. We took the first time in the history of the Republic that a sitting majority leader had ever been beaten.
It is a stunning upset.
All of them were broadsided by this victory of Dave Brad's.
I think what is the phrase that Steve Bannon always uses? The hobbits revolted. You know, the hobbits woke up in the Shire.
People want a new Republican Party.
Republicans got the message. The bipartisan immigration bill was dead.
I knew that night when I heard. I was talking to my Republican. They were basically, there's no reason for us to talk anymore. This is not going anywhere.
House Majority Leader Eric Cantor's defeat is the end of immigration reform.
Dave Brat proved this issue moves votes in terms of Republicans getting off the then popular immigration bills. There was no question it was a turning point on the immigration issue.
The GOP infighting is
Not only does Brad's victory confirm that it's also.
Two of the insurgents' seemingly impossible goals had been accomplished. Cantor was out, and so was the immigration bill.
Any hope of an immigration reform bill is dead.
Now they would concentrate on finding a candidate for the presidency of the United States. Bannon had been looking for years.
We had Palin in 8 in hope that she had run in 12.
Well, I'm not a member of the permanent political establishment.
It just didn't work out.
that is our destiny.
I actually worked with Lou Dobbs and tried to get Lou Dobbs to run in 12 as a populist.
On the previous policy, if they were.
I actually tried to talk Sessions into it. And Sessions goes, he turns to me and goes, it's not me. I'm not going to do it. He says, but our guy will come along. We'll find our guy. And that guy, a couple of years later, turned out to be Donald Trump.
The House Majority Leader has lost to his.
In Manhattan, Donald Trump had watched the Cantor defeat. Now he believed immigration as an issue was a dragon slayer.
Trump said he thinks Cantor's amazing loss can be traced to his stance on immigration policy.
While Bannon and Breitbart educated Trump from the outside, Trump advisor Sam Nunberg worked from the inside.
Nunberg had realized that this issue of immigration has real salience with Republican voters. The problem they had was they couldn't get Trump to stay on topic, famously short attention span. And so Sam Nunberg came up with this idea, essentially a mnemonic device to keep Trump focused on the issue of immigration.
So I said, well, why don't we say you're going to build a wall because it's bigger. You're going to build a wall, and you'll get Mexico to pay for it.
Trump took it on the road, testing out different versions of the line.
We have to build a fence, and it's got to be a beauty. Who can build better than Trump? I build. What I do.
Second in Iowa that day, and the crowd went nuts. You can watch it. The crowd went nuts.
If I run, I will tell you, the king of building buildings, the king of building walls, nobody can build them like Trump. That I can promise you. I can promise you that.
He said to me, you know, when I'm talking about immigration, I feel it. Sam, this is a movement. This is a movement. They get it. They get it.
He had found his issue. And now Donald Trump had an announcement to make.
The key moment is coming down the escalator. And I'm sitting there watching. We have 5 people up at Trump Tower. We have Boyle leading an entire team. We got wall-to-wall coverage.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us.
When he starts doing the over-the-top stuff, and I said, you watch,
they're gonna bite hard. And they're gonna bite hard and blow this up.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Oh my God. I said, he's just buried everything. They're gonna go, CNN is literally gonna broadcast 24 hours a day.
Donald Trump's comment about Mexican immigrants has created controversy nationwide.
Trump's comments have triggered outrage.
Trump not backing down from his controversial, some say racist claim.
I was waiting for Trump to take it back and say, oh, no, I didn't mean that Mexico is sending rapists. They're sending Rhodes Scholars. They're so much better than we are. I'm damned if he never took it back. So I had to say, okay, I'm for this guy.
And which Republican candidate has the best chance of winning the general election?
Of the declared ones right now, Donald Trump.
Bannon had his candidate, one who understood the politics of immigration.
I said, this is our guy. He's a very imperfect instrument, but he's an armor-piercing shell. I tell the guys, he's gonna go through this thing like a sieve through grass.
The insurgents would throw their weight behind the candidate. Bannon would push the Trump message from Breitbart. And they gave him something else, an essential endorsement from a sitting United States senator.
And I want to just introduce you to him for a sec. Senator Jeff Sessions.
Certainly, if you're an unconventional outsider candidate like Donald Trump, you actually do want some people who are part of the system.
Wow, what a crowd this is.
To validate your legitimacy. And that was Jeff Sessions' most important role in the success of President Trump.
This time in American history, we need to make America great again.
Also stepping out for Trump, another one of the insurgents.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the senior policy advisor for Mr. Trump, Mr. Steve Miller. How's everybody doing tonight?
He was the one who would get up there before Trump came in to speak and sort of rile up the crowd.
Donald J. Trump is going to secure the border and he's going to build that wall.
He would have this magic effect on the crowd. And the crowd is loving it. And I was like, who is that guy? And they said, oh, that's Stephen Miller. That's the one who brings the crazy.
Are you ready to vote for a policy that puts Americans first? Are you ready? Are you ready, Texas, to vote for Donald J. Trump?
Miller got close to Trump,
We will build a great wall along the
jotting ideas,
Who's going to pay for the wall?
keeping track of the musings,
Who illegally crosses the border will be detained.
stoking the anger,
He's going to drive the cars over the illegal.
writing the fragments that became the speeches.
Zero tolerance for criminal aliens. Zero.
Polls were brutal for Donald Trump, leading in every single national poll.
But by mid-August, the campaign was in trouble.
Now, was it Clinton now has a double-digit lead over Trump? Actually, down by large margins in swing states.
Is down in national polls.
Then Bannon got a call from the candidate.
Breaking news this morning, Donald Trump is changing his campaign.
Installing firebrand conservative Breitbart news boss Stephen
He
Bannon.
has a brand new campaign CEO.
Now, all three insurgents were at the epicenter, with direct access to a candidate who would use their immigration message as a political weapon.
I remember riding on the campaign plane with Sessions, Stephen Miller, Steve Bannon, and they suddenly had this vessel in Donald Trump, and they were giddy. I mean, they were really excited. Like, this is our moment. This is our historical moment.
Decision desk has called Pennsylvania for Donald Trump.
On election night, it all paid off.
This means that Donald Trump will be the 45th president of the United States.
Trump's victory, after having run on this anti-immigrant message, had precisely the effect that Bannon and Sessions had hoped for 3 years earlier when they first sat in the Breitbart embassy. It elevated immigration to the forefront of the Republican Party.
Fox News had also received the message. Now they were all in with Trump on immigration.
You want to know what this election was about? Look at America's open borders. They're a mess, and they're not secure. A weak federal government has allowed immigration in America to become a national scandal.
He's going to move very quickly on the immigration priority that helped get him elected.
Fox News saw that the Republican Party had been changed by Donald Trump. Immigration was the issue, and so Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity and others would hammer that night in, night out.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
Steve Bannon was put at the top of the food chain as Trump's chief strategist. Stephen Miller, senior advisor to the president. And Jeff Sessions was given one of the most powerful jobs in the cabinet, Attorney General.
All of a sudden, they're three of the most powerful people in the country.
On the wall in his war room at the West Wing, Bannon created an immigration action plan.
I said, all we have to do is flood the zone. Every day we hit them with three things, bang, bang, bang. These guys will never be able to recover, but we got to start with muzzle velocity.
The muzzle velocity, a series of harsh executive orders, commanding the government to build a wall, to detain, to deport, to prosecute.
This was Miller's tactic. You know, while you still have all that political wind at your back after winning an election, just, you know, hit him big, hit him hard.
Opportunity for him to meet with his Secretary of Defense, James Mattis.
Immediately, Trump caused outrage, delivering part of what Bannon called their shock and awe approach.
Protection of the nation from foreign terrorist entry into the United States.
It was known as the travel ban, blocking entry to people from 7 predominantly Muslim countries.
A scene of outrage at JFK Airport in New York. Protests all across the country were actually around the world.
Now protests, outrage, and backlash.
And immediately chaos ensues. There are protesters at the airports. People are getting detained left and right.
Seattle police actually dispersed their crowds.
Watching the chaos on television, Republican Congressman Charlie Dent called White House staffer Ben Howard.
I said, Ben, you know, was this thing run by the Department of Defense? He said, well, no. How about state? No. Homeland Security? Well, sort of. Justice? And I said, who did this? He said, Miller. I said, well, who the hell's Miller? I didn't know who Stephen Miller was at that moment. I said, who's Miller? And he said, I can't look.
At the White House, they knew who Stephen Miller was, and a faction there wanted to keep him as far away from the president as possible.
You had the Bannon Miller Sessions faction, and then you had the Gary Cohn, Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, Rich Priebus, and others.
You had the two camps start to develop, the more establishment camp and more the kind of disruptors, populist, nationalist camp, and then everything eventually became a knife fight shortly thereafter.
After the travel ban backlash, Bannon's stack of harsh executive orders was put on hold. His opponents in the West Wing were gaining ground with the president.
Why he surrounded himself by people actively opposed to his agenda. Why he did that, who knows? Who knows? He has surrounded himself with people who disagree with him. Why did he hire his kids? Could be narcissism. They love me for me. Who knows?
You're supposed to really push hard the first 100 days. What is going on? What are they waiting?
The things you elected Trump to do don't seem to be happening.
Bannon and Miller wanted to make sure a tough stance on immigration stayed on the agenda. They would look up Pennsylvania Avenue to the Department of Justice, where Jeff Sessions was the boss.
Jeff Sessions is the nerve center of the Trump administration's anti-immigration agenda. And Sessions wastes no time once he takes over at DOJ, pretty systematically retooling the asylum system.
He's working on sanctuary cities. He's trying to figure out a way to starve cities of funding. And he's also working on what are basically beginnings of the zero tolerance policy.
The insurgents placed dozens of allies throughout the government. many of them Sessions' former Senate staffers.
Jeff Sessions and the people he hired to work with him inside the Justice Department knew how to work that system. They worked it early and often, and they used their power over immigration in ways we have not seen for a generation or more.
They began checking off the boxes.
What Sessions is doing simultaneously is he is starting to pull all of the relevant levers to make sure that there are no impediments to mass deportation.
But Jeff Sessions had a big problem.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good afternoon from New York. We're coming on the air to bring you a news conference from
The Russia investigation, run by his own Justice Department, was encircling the Trump White House and the president himself.
I have now decided to recuse myself from any existing or future investigations of any matter relating in any way to the campaigns for President of the United States. Thank you all. Thank you.
We're watching TV on Air Force One. And the president was very upset because he felt like he was being abandoned. And Trump is very angry, very frustrated. And Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump's relationship was never the same after that.
It wasn't long before Trump confronted Sessions at the White House.
President Trump just berates Jeff Sessions. Sessions is humiliated. I mean, he's told people it's one of the low points of his professional career. He's just completely dressed down.
The grand design was in peril. Sessions was preparing to resign. Steve Bannon reacted.
I said, you were there from the beginning. I said, you rode shotgun with me the entire time. Good shot. I said, is there any doubt in your mind that this was divine providence that put us here, right? That this just didn't happen, that this, something's worked here, because he's a very imperfect instrument, but we're here. I said, and you're never gonna quit. He says, I will never quit. I go, no matter how bad it gets, because I'll never quit.
Sessions returned to the Justice Department to redouble his efforts on immigration.
It was the only place, pretty much, that anything was being done on Trump's promises. So it was really fun to watch Trump humiliating Sessions every day on Twitter. The one guy keeping your promises.
Trump has continued to rage against Sessions for his decision.
Today, lashing out on Twitter.
At the DOJ, Sessions was quietly laying the groundwork for a big move. He wanted to roll back an Obama-era policy known as DACA, protections for undocumented immigrants who had come to America as children.
DACA is a recognition and a realization that when somebody comes here as a child, they're brought here not of their own choice, and we should recognize and acknowledge that and be compassionate toward those people.
They were called dreamers, but to Sessions and his allies, DACA was an amnesty that sent the wrong message.
One amnesty begets another amnesty, it begets more and more illegal. You're creating a magnet for more and more illegal aliens to pour in, as every country that's ever tried an amnesty has discovered and never done it again.
Miller and Bannon needed the president to agree to end DACA. But at his first press conference, they realized they had a problem.
Thank you very much.
The DACA program for immigration. What is your plan? Do you plan to continue that program or to end it?
We're going to show great heart. DACA is a very, very difficult subject for me, I will tell you. To me, it's one of the most difficult subjects I have, because you have these incredible kids. You know, I love these kids. I love kids. I have kids, grandkids.
It became clear that he was really waffling on DACA. And Bannon was getting really worried that this was actually becoming a problem, that Trump was not moving quickly to end it, and he was actually seeming to be reluctant to do it at all.
Bannon swung into action. He reached out to a rising star from the hard right, Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach.
Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller wanted to see movement on the DACA issue, wanted to see it rescinded.
Bannon says to him, you got to have a way that we can kind of force this issue on DACA.
The idea was to box Trump in. Kobach would use 10 conservative state attorneys general.
What Kobach and the attorney generals wanted to do was to get this up at the right level. And I think that's why the Texas AG took the lead, wrote a very powerful letter.
The letter was a threat. Legal action against the Trump administration if they didn't stop DACA.
And so I think that was an important piece of the puzzle, or an important shift in the landscape that helped move the administration.
All right, well, a major deadline for the Trump Justice Department looming early next month.
Texas and 9 other states plan to sue the administration.
The letter worked. Trump relented. Sessions delivered the news.
Good morning. I'm here today to announce that the program known as DACA that was effectuated under the Obama administration is being rescinded.
Jeff Sessions makes it pretty clear they will, in fact, be moving to possibly deport thousands of people who were brought to this country as young children and who know no other home but America.
Thank you very much.
It's a pretty devastating blow to about 800,000 dreamers.
Major change in immigration policy announced.
And immediately it's like a bomb goes off in Washington.
What the president called a case of heart now sparking emotional protests all over the country.
They go back home. They can send me back home because this is my home.
As the community prayed over them, some broke down in tears. They were all DACA recipients, now filled.
Protesters storming major cities all across the country. Outrage decision impacting nearly 800,000 people.
As the negative coverage hammered the president, he made a political calculation. He backed off.
Does anybody really want to throw out good, educated, and accomplished young people who have jobs? Some serving in the military? Really?
To the insurgents, it seemed like they had lost the president.
Yet another bombshell.
Their enemies were on the rise.
Controversial chief strategist forced out after a short.
After 7 months, Steve Bannon was out.
How does Trump think he can get rid of Bannon? Wasn't Bannon the guy that got Trump?
Over time, more and more Bushies arrived. So more and more people who were from the swamp, who had long resumes and were plugged into positions of importance and significance. In part and parcel, it's the reason for why I left the White House. It may be the reason for why Steve left the White House when he did.
President Trump holding a critical meeting today with lawmakers. Meetings over at the White House today.
With the insurgents weakened, Trump improvised. They watched what they considered a mind-boggling event. Congressional leaders, including Democrats, were invited to make a deal that could protect the Dreamers.
Here we are in the cabinet room, and I come in and notice, to my surprise, that my nameplate is right next to the President of the United States, to his right. I was not a close friend of this president.
The president shocked the entire room when he allowed the cameras to stay for the meeting.
So now we have the press giving live coverage for this meeting.
I think we're going to come up with an answer. I hope we're going to come up with an answer for DACA, and then we go further than that later on down the road. Perhaps you'd like to say a few words.
There is a sense of urgency that's felt by many of us when it comes to this issue. 1,000 a day will lose DACA protection. 900 of them are members of the U.S. military. 20,000 of them are school teachers. Lives are hanging in the balance of our getting the job done.
I agree with that. I very much agree with it.
And the president is referring to me as Dick all the time, and I'm thinking, you know, I guess I'm his friend at this point.
On television, the president said he wanted to make a deal, have an agreement to save DACA.
When this group comes back, hopefully with an agreement, this group and others from the Senate, from the House, comes back with an agreement, I'm signing it. I mean, I will be signing it.
Senator Feinstein almost can't believe it. Every Democrat sitting on the edge of their seat in that room wondering, is the president about to break from his own party and cut a deal?
I'd like to ask the question, what about a clean DACA bill now? And with the commitment that we go into a comprehensive immigration reform procedure?
I have no problem. I think that's basically what Dick has said. We're going to come up with DACA, we're going to do DACA, and then we can start immediately on the phase 2, which would be comprehensive. Yeah, I would like to.
He starts to actually get way beyond where certainly Stephen Miller, but a lot of his advisors are on the substance of what the deal would look like.
I'll take the heat. I don't care. I'll take all the heat you want to get. And I'll take the heat off both the Democrats and the Republicans. My whole life has been heat. I like heat in a certain way.
It was disconcerting, and I did kind of have my head in my hands, but I've had that a lot in listening to the president. He is the kind of guy who, at least rhetorically, is going to be prone to just giving away the store, which is why even McCarthy, who's kind of a squish on all of these things, immediately piped up.
Mr. President, you need to be clear, though. I think what Senator Feinstein's asking here, we talk about just DACA, we don't want to be back here 2 years later. You have to have security, as the secretary would tell you. I think that's what you said.
No, I think she's saying something.
To immigration hardliners, it was a reminder that the president could not be trusted.
It seems, I think, perfectly apparent to me and anyone else who observes this president. He's impulsive. He says things off the top of his head. He bears the impression of, like a couch, bears the impression of the last person who sat on him. It's just whoever gave him the last piece of advice, he goes out and says it.
I think I really agree with Dick. I think it'll happen.
In an unusual move, cameras were rolling for nearly an hour on Tuesday.
President actually seemed open to comprehensive immigration reform.
Just 2 days later, Senators Dick Durbin and Lindsey Graham were ready to deliver the deal Trump asked for.
It included a future for DACA and Dreamers. It also included money for his wall. I mean, it really was what he'd asked for.
Durbin let the White House know.
Within minutes, the president calls back. What can I do for you, Senator? Well, Senator Graham and I have a bill. He said, good.
The president said he wanted to meet with the two senators that day.
I found that incredible. I couldn't believe I could ever get in to see a president in short order like that.
Miller had to move quickly.
One of Miller's talents was spinning the president up. He was constantly handing him, statistics and numbers and papers and links to Breitbart, links to Fox News clips.
Miller's allies in the right-wing media sounded the
Doesn't
alarm.
put a wall, a real wall, not a no, they're all giggling that he's getting ruled.
Talk radio turned up the volume.
Is the only thing that Donald Trump can do to possibly derail himself. This is the end of the road for the Republican Party.
All the right-wing media figures who championed Trump are losing their minds because all of a sudden everything Trump said during the campaign seems like it's up for debate, that he's willing to trade all of his campaign promises away as bartering chips.
Senators Durbin and Graham arrived at the White House with their deal in hand.
And while they're waiting in the West Wing lobby, all of a sudden the doors open and other people start coming in. Tom Cotton, very, very conservative. He has said publicly that, the DREAM Act is a non-starter. David Perdue, same thing, he walks through the door. Then there's Bob Goodlatte, who's the Republican chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. And then Stephen Miller walks in, and before they know it, they're all in the Oval Office all together.
It's really Miller who makes sure that the room is filled with immigration hardliners.
They're there to represent a position that they feel strongly about, which is frankly much closer to President Trump's position.
Well, things went south in a hurry. Almost from his first word, you could tell that the president I spoke to 2 hours before and the one 2 days before who had invited us to come by had changed dramatically. And now he was opposed to every part of it. And that's when a lot of the profanity started flying.
The president was already in an unhappy mood because he kept reviewing all this migrant data from Miller, and he just erupts. He erupts. It's gone from a chummy chat with the senators on camera. It's gone from cordial rapport with Senator Feinstein to vulgarity in front of Senator Durbin and others.
The vulgarity stunned the room.
He essentially says, why do we want all these people from shithole countries? At which point everyone kind of stops.
Doesn't want people from Haiti or from Africa, countries that he refers to as shithole countries. He says he wants people from Norway, and it's impossible to ignore that the people he's talking about as undesirable are people of color and Black people.
His jaw dropping as he went through this long litany of grievances he had against immigrants in this country, particularly those from what he referred to as shithole countries.
And all the while, Stephen Miller, once again, standing at the perimeter of the room, listening to that comment, and he knows that it's mission accomplished. He's done what he wanted to do.
The immigration hardliners had won. There would be no DACA deal. The fate of the Dreamers would be in the hands of the courts.
A week ago, Central Americans crossed from Guatemala into Mexico. 1,100 Central American immigrants
Now, in the spring of 2018, From the Justice Department, Sessions and Miller would raise the ante. It was time to crack down on the border.
They wanted to send a deterrent message to a very dramatic way in the hope that they would scare these people off and have them stay in Central America.
Sessions released this tough directive using the words zero tolerance.
So Jeff Sessions is using the authority that was retained in the Attorney General's office, and he recognizes he's got a lot of levers that he can pull. He's got a lot of tools that he can use.
Everyone who crosses the border would be prosecuted, even families with children.
If you smuggle illegal aliens across our border, then we will prosecute you. If you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you. And that child may be separated from you as required by law.
It became known as family separation. Like the travel ban and DACA, family separation quickly turned into a crisis as the images were released.
Young children are pulled from the arms of their mothers. It ushers in a part of America, the history of America, that people are going to look at for years to come as the defining moments of the Trump presidency.
Children were separated from the adults with whom they arrived, and there wasn't meticulous association of those children with those adults.
Here's the thing that I think broke America's heart.
They didn't know what they were doing. They weren't even keeping tabs on where these children and who their parents are and where their parents were at. That's what they did.
All it's doing is showcasing unbelievable things.
Of separating a child that doesn't know what's going on.
But Stephen Miller insisted it was all part of the grand design.
When I talked to Miller, he said that he believes anytime the country is focused on immigration, the president is winning. So when you're at the border getting footage of crying children being ripped from the arms of their mothers, that would seem to most people like a bad development for the president. To Stephen Miller, he thinks that this is just drawing the attention once again to the issue that we care about most, and he sees that as a win.
Anger over the Trump administration's policy of separating immigrant children from their families.
Now, Democratic lawmakers are voicing their anger over the family.
Growing outrage over families being separated at the border.
The controversy quickly consumed Washington.
The White House faces a growing backlash of anger.
For weeks, the president and the White House were under assault.
White House is struggling to explain and defend in practice.
Miller wanted to stay the course. The president's own family were strongly on the other side.
Every day. Yesterday, 70 kids. Today, 70 kids.
Once again, Trump capitulated.
Signing an executive order I consider to be a very important executive order. It's about keeping families together. Ivanka feels very strongly, my wife feels very strongly about it. I feel very strongly about it. I think anybody with a heart would feel very strongly about it. We don't like to see families separated. This takes care of the problem. Thank you very much.
I'm very disappointed in President Donald Trump. I think he's not getting the best advice on this. It's very disturbing.
The insurgents had again lost control of what Bannon had called the imperfect instrument.
Trump signs an executive order, and for the 10 minutes it's going to survive.
U.S. Attorney General is stepping down, apparently at the request of President.
A few months later, Jeff Sessions was finally out.
Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General of the United States, has submitted his letter of resignation.
Stephen Miller would be the only one of the original insurgents still on the inside.
Sessions didn't survive and Bannon didn't survive, but Miller, who's the ultimate survivor, has managed to outlast pretty much everyone.
The ramifications
ramifications are many.
Miller is a talented bureaucratic infighter. Miller understood that in order to survive and have influence with Donald Trump, you need to consistently display a fanatical degree of loyalty. And Miller has always been willing to do that, publicly and privately.
Record number of migrant families have arrived at the southern border in recent months, 144,000. That is the highest.
The president had signaled he was scaling back zero tolerance, but there was an unintended consequence. The number of migrants increased.
Migrant families surged after the Trump administration ended.
The ending of the policy has a pretty pronounced effect on the numbers of people showing up. The word gets back to Central America that zero tolerance is not really zero tolerance anymore. That if you come with a child, in fact, you will not be separated from that child.
Right now, on Fox, they call the caravans an invasion.
It's not a caravan, it's an invasion. We have every right to be able to protect our borders.
And at this hour, what happens with the president on caravans is he sees footage of them on Fox News and starts to fulminate against them. And it becomes to him this image of a border being overrun.
103,000 people were apprehended at the southern border last month.
The president grows angrier and angrier by the week as he continues to hear new numbers, new data about what's happening at the border. He can fly into fits of rage. Miller doesn't discourage this at all.
For Miller, the crisis was an opportunity. It was election season, the 2018 midterms, and Trump was in campaign mode.
So the president's going all out for the next few days, hosting 10 more rallies across the nation, focusing on illegal immigration.
Miller knew what would fire up the crowds.
We want our country to be a sanctuary for law-abiding Americans, not criminal aliens. We're not playing games. Because you look at what's marching up, that's the case.
The president uses that to drum up his election push for the midterms and calls that election the election of the caravan.
It was also the beginning of Trump's own re-election campaign.
The closer we get to 2020, the more this president and his advisors are saying immigration is our fire. That's the fire we put in our torch to try to win in 2020.
Determined not to lose his base, Trump was firmly back on the side of the insurgents. Now, Miller would call the shots.
Stephen Miller is the point person at the president's side on the immigration issue. He is a driving force in, and he has an awful lot of knowledge that he brings to bear at the president's right hand.
Miller pushed controversial executive actions,
Is announcing a new regulation that will allow migrant families.
cutting back on refugees.
Trump administration changing the rules for migrants hoping to claim asylum in the United States.
Trump administration plans to take
Building the wall.
billions from the Pentagon, from the military to build this border wall. Targets hundreds of thousands of people.
Slashing legal immigration.
Administration issuing a regulation that would deny green cards for legal immigrants who claim immigrants are not welcome.
Initiating raids across the country.
This is thousands of people nationwide are racing now for ICE raids. President Trump's order to begin stricter
Expected to be talking about.
And igniting a firestorm.
Kids might be left parentless in the process, makes it all the more disturbing.
Officials called it the biggest worksite immigration enforcement operation in its Trump would close down our southern border.
It had been 6 years since that dinner at the Breitbart Embassy. Zero tolerance had won the day.
From the dinner we had, we brought border security up to the forefront. Right now, we actually are engaged as a nation, and I think in 2020, it's even going to be more of a centerpiece in the national debate, as it should be.
For Sessions, Bannon, Miller, it was all part of the grand design.
We are now debating all the topics on Donald Trump's turf. Okay, that in January 2013, that looked like a pipe dream. Today, that's the reality.
Go to pbs.org/frontline for Frontline's latest transparency project and explore the dozens of interviews in zero tolerance.
They said, oh, that's Stephen Miller. That's the one who brings the
crazy.
It was called
Be narcissism.
Zero Tolerance in America.
For me.
I mean, again, not to be, everything is political, I suppose, but I guess the one thing I learned is that there's a nuance to things, and maybe my the one thing I did learn this week, though, too, was maybe my grumpiness towards Trump was misplaced and misinformed, because maybe it was actually not this guy, but the other guy, right? I don't know. But I guess, too, I think, oh, that's my citizenship test. Let's just be nice people and be kind. Anyone else want to make a closing comment? Yeah. This guy here. So this guy, apparently, from what I learned, this guy is really, like, he started like a this Breitbart.com. He started this like website, and on the website, like, it's his website. He's the editor, and he basically puts this website out there, right? And this is like that whole thing about like Russian robots like posting things on like Facebook and stuff. So this is the guy that basically writes the content that then all the other things like push out there. This guy, let's see if we can find it easy. So that's him. The bald guy is actually an immigrant. The bald guy, that guy, he is like a policy guy that's good friends with the guy who's got the website. Yeah, he is. Yeah, or his parents are. I think that's the way it is. His parents are, or his grandparents are. So this guy is really good at like writing policy. So the reason why you need all three of them, that's what I was saying about the perfect storm, is the one guy's got a website that everyone's reading. This guy can write the policy that Trump does, and the other guy, the little guy, I don't know how to say, the sloppy guy, the Wreck-It Ralph guy, the bald guy, and the sorry, I'm being mean, I'm generalizing. The other guy, the politician, the Jeff Sessions, he's the politician that gave them legitimacy. So you, again, it seems like, actually, I mean, the thing I learned actually after watching this and even after this week was that maybe I actually shouldn't be so critical of Trump, because Trump in some sense is just the vehicle for these three people, right? Like, if it was up to these three people, I mean, I guess the one thing I learned is that, like, personally, as much as I find their policies abhorrent, I think if these were the three delivering it, I think their success rate would be much lower than like a carnival kind of guy out there, like, ripping us all up. Because it seems like, right, like, it takes that bald guy, the Stephen Miller guy, to like whip everyone into shape, and that these yeah, right here we go, right? So this guy's the politician that gave them legitimacy. He got kicked out for doing kind of the right thing and saying, I'm not going to judge Trump. This guy who's running the website also gets kicked out because he's like the passionate guy that's like pushing Trump to the thing, the zealot. This guy just says nothing now, and he's writing the policy, and he's now, this is the only, for Trump today, this guy is the only vehicle for what these two believe. So, and I don't know anything about this guy. If someone wants to type it into Wikipedia now, but I think this guy is then still friends with Trump and must be the guy that is on the re-election. What does it say, Elijah? Does it say anything about this? Stephen Miller. What does it say about Stephen Miller? Does it say that he still works for Trump?